Welcome back to KTN News. Let's have a look at Pope Benedict's burial history. And he gave the world the first retired pope in 600 years. He's also the oldest person to ascend to the post in more than 2 centuries. It is almost 3 days since Pope Benedict XVI was buried in the Vatican. We now take a look at the man whose papacy was crystallized in the trenches of World War II in the Nazi Germany.
He exits the stage with a legacy of firsts, one with a mix of achievements. He was the first sitting pope to resign in 600 years, and the oldest to be elected to the influential post in over 2 centuries. His decisions and pronouncements opened Vatican to external and internal criticisms that unseen before during the reign of the conservative Pope John Paul II, who was his mentor and key ally. This is the Pope who grappled with the 2 key issues that posed a major threat to Catholicism: the threat of secularism, and has also been a headache not just to Catholic leadership but also to other religions. For Joseph Alois Ratzinger, the journey to papacy began on a rather dark footing. 1945. The Second World War was drawing to a close in Germany, with Russians approaching from the east and the Western Allies closing on Berlin from the west. German soldiers were surrendering in droves as the Nazi war machine and morbid ideology unraveled. The unlucky Germans, some still miners in uniform, were caught by Russian soldiers and sent to labor camps in gulags, where they died in cold and unwanted lands. But the ones who yielded to the Americans and British had a better fate. In these troubled times, one of the soldiers who lined the streets of Bavaria was none other than Joseph Ratzinger. He had just been promoted from the infantry division to the anti-aircraft unit, charged with protecting a local BMW plant. The Americans would later set base in his household as he deserted the army that he never wanted to be part of. His wartime over, it was time for the young man to rekindle his dream of being a Catholic priest in Bavaria. Ratzinger was born on the Holy Saturday of 16th April 1927. His father was a police officer who hated the rise of Hitler and his Nazi philosophy, for which he paid the price of constant harassment and demotion from his rank as a senior police officer. When Ratzinger came of age, he was forcefully conscripted into the Nazi Youth League before joining the war aged just 14. His disdain for the Nazi was based on the killing of his cousin, who suffered Down syndrome in horrible biological purification program pushed by the Hitler regime.
The Nazi government was so bad, right, that it was quite bad, and very disciplinarian. So he learned discipline, that's about it. But I don't think it had much effect. But he expected, I'm sure, that he expected obedience to the rule of God.
In 1945, immediately after the war, he and his brother George joined the ducal George Annam, and later being ordained on the same day of 29th June 1951. While George decided to pursue a career in liturgical music of the Catholic Church, Joseph opted for the world of academia, rising to be a respected religious scholar with many papers and books to his name. His rise saw him teach in various institutions of higher learning in Germany and abroad, with a special focus on more conservative religious learning. This was seen as a contrast, for in his early career in the church, he was a key proponent of reforms in the church.
He was more definite than about his own life and about the life of the church than many people. But he was saying to you, if you're a Christian, be a Christian. That is what I'd like to say about him. And what do they expect? Somebody going around for speaking, as I say, these crusades and things like that. It's easy to rouse the crowd, but to talk to you as a parent or to talk to your children, what type of children are you doing when you're not there? When you hand it over to somebody else who doesn't give it, who are just paid to do it, they're you know, and I think that Benedict said, look, I have to be the way I am, I have to put up with things, but at the end of the day, it is what Christ said.
On 24th March 1977, Ratzinger was appointed Archbishop of Munich and Freising in Germany, which saw him being ordained a bishop on May 1977. The then Pope John Paul II would later appoint him a cardinal the same year. Ratzinger later resigned from his bishop's post in 1982 after being appointed prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith by Pope John Paul. The two would form a close working relationship, leading to Ratzinger being the then sitting Pope's close confidant. Joseph would later join the European Academy of Sciences and Arts thanks to his academic credentials. Upon Pope John Paul II's death on the 2nd of April 2005, Joseph Ratzinger was seen as a front-runner in the succession that began immediately after the mourning and interment of the Pope. At the Papal Conclave in the same month, Ratzinger was elected Pope after a record 4 ballots. As the white smoke wafted from the Vatican on 19th of April 2005, there came as an answer to the question that many asked, if not Ratzinger, then why not Ratzinger? His win saw the oldest person in 2 centuries elected to the papacy at the age of 78. He would later adopt the title Pope Benedict XVI. The name was inspired by Benedict of Nursia, who founded the Western monasticism. This is a religious movement that preserved Western culture in the wake of the fall of Rome. His election brought a new inspiration, awakening and interest in Catholicism. Many young people were drawn to the church as they rekindled their faith and sought purpose in religion. He was described as a reformist after he spoke against what he termed as the dictatorship of relativism. His writings on spiritual matters moved many who saw him as a gentle and kind religious figure.
His achievement was there is a solid base for Christianity, and that is what he wanted. People didn't like it. People don't like it. They want to have freedom to do whatever they like, but you can see that the world needs order. Benedict would have found that very difficult to take, that people were believing one thing, were saying they believe in things, but they didn't. They did exactly the opposite. And I think that the fact that he quietly set a pattern
He also unveiled a new chapter after openly admitting the reality of sex abuses in the church. As he sought to deal with these issues, many more scandals came to the fore. As a conservative religious leader, Pope Benedict goes down in history as one of the most controversial figures of the Catholic Church within his short stint as a pope. In September 2016, he kicked off a storm in the Muslim world when he allegedly quoted a 14th century emperor Byzantine, who is thought to have branded Islam an evil religion. He later apologized, saying he was misquoted. In January 2009, he drew condemnation from different quarters after lifting excommunications on 4 ultra-conservative bishops, one of whom was accused of denying the Holocaust. His attack on abortion and LGBTQ supporters also put him at loggerheads with proponents of the two controversial issues. Some right groups also accused the Pope of condoning and shielding priests involved in sex abuses against male minors globally.
John Paul had to deal with so many problems, the sex abuses, the sex scandals, and therefore he was regarded as a steady man, a man who knew what he wanted, and he put forth that in his talks, and he was very conscious that he was speaking in the name of Christ, and to say that he was the ideal successor, he was a successor. Whether he was an ideal successor, I wouldn't know.
Within an advancing age and ill health, Pope Benedict XVI was slowly down as the threat of secularism hang over his papacy.
He had two things. Was that nowadays, which is still there, is there are so many different sects which are part of the church, which have their own idea, and therefore he was faced with that. He was faced with putting Christ back into Christianity. You know, so many people claim to be Christians, but then they have their own idea. And you needed a unifying force. And he was a unifying force.
A lot of citizens in Europe and the United States were deserting the church. According to a 2018 report by Pew Research Center, many people in Europe drifted away from religious teachings because they just stopped believing. Others said they were driven away by scandals and the church's position on social issues. The report also says the population has dropped 24% in Europe, down from 65%. Latin America currently has the highest Catholic population, which stands at 335 million followers. Italy, where Vatican sits, leads with the highest number of church-attending Christians, which stands at 40%, followed by Portugal at 38% and Ireland at 35% and 34% respectively. Finland and Sweden have the least church attendees at only 9% of the population. On the 11th of February 2013, the Vatican indicated that the Pope was to resign. This came to pass on the 28th of the same month, when Pope Benedict XVI did indeed quit as the Pope of the Catholic Church. He cited his advanced age, his quest to rest and right, and ill health. His brother George confirmed that the Pope had planned to do so way back. Pope Benedict XVI became the first Pope to relinquish the seat voluntarily in 600 years. He followed Pope Gregory XII, who also resigned in 1415. As a retired Pope, He took the title Pope Emeritus to befit his new status and had remained silent on church matters for the days he was in retirement until his death. The Joseph Ratzinger Benedict XVI Roman Library at the Pontifical Teutonic College was named in his honor. He canonized over 45 religious figures in his less than 8-year tenure. 870 others were canonized. One of them was Irene Stefani, who served in Gikondi village in Nyeri County between 1915 and 1930. Locals called her Nyatha, meaning Mother of Mercy. Interestingly, the beatification was overseen by a Kenyan bishop appointed by the late Pope.
He wasn't prepared to listen to many things, but on the whole, he was a more traditional man than John Paul, because his training was completely different.
Apud Eternum intercedat, ut votum filii sui, Pape Benedicto, ostendat atque.
At the ripe age of 95 years, Pope Emeritus Benedict rested on the eve of 2023. He was living an old age of honor, having dreamt and crafted his heritage that he would later sit back and reflect on. For a man who believed in the truth and sought to be as close to it as possible, he exempted the motto of cooperators of truth. For KTN News, I'm Dennis Aseto.